Welcome to the Gifted and Distractible vlog. Normally, you just have me to listen to, but we're mixing it up this week, and I've invited my very good friend and colleague, Marc Smolowitz. Hi, Marc.
Hello, Julie. So happy to be here and be a special guest.
It's so great. A special guest is right. So for those of you who don't know Marc, Marc is a multi-award winning independent filmmaker based in San Francisco. He's done lots of very cool projects, but my heart is definitely taken with the G Word film currently in production. You got to check out all the info, some clips, some awesome stuff at gwordfilm.com. And I have the distinct pleasure and honor of serving as an advisor and partner of the film, pretty much from like way back in the beginning. So anyway, guess what? It is GTN week. What does that mean? Gifted, Talented, Neurodiversity Week. And we're partnering with the G Word to talk about this fabulous week and to talk about this beautiful topic of bringing joy and equity into focus. So Marc, tell us about GTN Week, since it is really the G Word brainchild.
Well, thank you so much. Well, yes, you are right. We are recording this a few weeks beforehand, but this will be published during our GTN Awareness Week. That's Gifted, Talented, Neurodiverse Awareness Week. And this is actually the second installment. So this is becoming an annual thing. We hope to sustain it ongoingly each October, the last week of October. And last year was our first installment, and it was an incredible success. It kind of like blew our minds how successful it was, showing us that there was great interest, real demand, and real enthusiasm for the content that we were able to kind of create for the community. Just by way of data points, more than 2,100 people registered for GTN Awareness Week last year from 16 countries around the world. And it's a really strong indication that we're doing something that people are responding well to.
And that there's a huge need, right?
Exactly. And there are all kinds of organizations that do amazing virtual programming, but this was really our attempt last year to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, we are here, these are our values, and we want to be a place where we can bring the communities together that care about gifted, talented, and neurodiverse, and come together to sort of celebrate those verticals of experience and expression, right? And for a lot of people, GTN, those words and concepts mean different things, right? So when we curated last year, I think we had 9 events in 5 days, and they were really kind of coming out of the spirit of the movie that I'm making, which is that sort of how giftedness intersects with our identities, right? And how those things kind of exist in the same space, so we had lots of virtual programming on sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And in your show notes, or how you share this on social, we'll remind people that there's an archive of all those events from last year. So those exist. They are evergreen content that people can enjoy and connect with all the time already, right? Great topics. I'm sure your audience and listeners and viewers would love to connect there. So this year we felt like we already did that, right? We already did a week-long offering that had a lot of that sort of kind of what I call giftedness 101 content, how, that sort of introductory content, or sort of, the state of giftedness style content. And you'll see what I mean if your viewers go there, what the topics we're trying to be about. So I think they have shelf life. They matter this year as much as last year. So, but this year we decided to take a little different approach. We actually came up with a theme for this year, and we invited our advisors and partners and other collaborators around the world to come up with programming ideas and to actually take a more distributed approach to creating events. And in the spirit of the pandemic opening up and 2022 being more possible for people to connect in person, our approach this year is hybrid. So there are some places that are doing an event in person this week, be it a school or a place where people can come together, and I'm dropping in virtually by Zoom to say hi to those people and kind of get them excited about expressing their hashtag gifted joy. Or people are doing their own virtual events and we're helping them produce those, or we're producing our own and inviting people to join with us. So there is a wonderful program happening this week. And the amazing part is that we're not producing all of it. We're actually working in partnership to deliver it and create it, and letting the community kind of take collaborative ownership of it with us. And so we're really grateful for that exciting momentum that is coming out of our advisors and partners that we can create the scaffolding, and as a small bootstrap moving endeavor, really continue to grow this community potential to come together once a year to celebrate GTN awareness. And so what does that mean, right? I think that can look like a lot of different things for depending on who you are and where you sit with all this stuff. But the way that I describe it is that, everyone who knows me knows I'm openly gay, I'm openly queer, and I'm out and proud, and I have been for more than 32 years, right? And it's huge when you come out of the closet as a gay person, right? Or any kind of sort of gender diversity or sexual diversity expression is a huge thing to come out about, right? Well, coming out as gifted, talented, or neurodiverse,
or 2E, yep,
or 2E, or any of these words and concepts that are a giftedness expression, kind of similar, not that it's sort of the dynamic is somewhat similar. Speaking your truth, being out and proud about being GT or N or 2E or 3E or whatever the word is that fits your profile, right? It's an act of coming out in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of like it having an awareness week, almost like it's similar to Pride Month. It's like a point of pride for us to come together as a community, GTN folks of all kinds, from all backgrounds.
I love that reframe, Mark, because it's a difference. It's being different and loving being different, which I suspect is part of that finding joy.
Yeah, exactly. So this year we landed on the theme #GiftedJoy, and the way that we landed on that was kind of gradual, and it was over the course of 2022, and doing really sort of active listening to the communities that we're dealing with on a regular basis. And something that has been a huge theme for me while I've been making this movie is that there is so much trauma in gifted and neurodiverse spaces, right? It's just trauma, 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 trauma. I mean, you cannot overstate that, right? The trauma narratives that I have encountered as a filmmaker that we see everywhere and that are going to be in my movie, that's a huge part of the story of giftedness. There's just no way around that, right? Before this year, my message and my sort of guiding principle was that, well, how do you talk about trauma, right? Well, the other side of trauma is empowerment, right? And so I was always making that connection for people, that these two things are almost like the sort of the different sides of the same coin, trauma and empowerment. You can't eradicate trauma, but by way of empowerment, you can sort of combat it, or you can offset it, or you can tap into a well of resiliency, right? This year, I've landed on a new concept, which is gifted joy. And I'm sort of seeing it as kind of like a three-legged stool, right? So trauma, empowerment, and joy. And they kind of are a three-legged stool that prop up the person, prop up the community, prop us all up to kind of make sense of our daily lives and our lived and learned experience. And for me, like, it can't be all about trauma. If trauma is the only reason we're showing up, like, why even show up to participate in a community, right? Trauma is a very isolating, sort of, difficult, lonely experience at times. We need different types of strategies to break out of that, right? And so gifted joy, #GiftedJoy, it's kind of whatever you want to make of that concept, right?
I love it.
Yeah, I believe strongly that joy belongs to everyone. It should be the purview of every community that wants to call itself a community, right? And so 1 week out of the year, the GTN communities, if they exist, and I believe they do, right, can come together to celebrate. And, if it's, if the Pride Week concept works for you, grab at it, because that doesn't belong to just the LGBTQ community either.
And maybe it's learning that week to bring the joy into the other 51 weeks of the year. And actually,
exactly
what you're talking about, Mark, is so resonant with the gifted and 2E community, because you're talking about positive disintegration, Kashmir's Dabrowski theory, where in order to find your best self, you've got to experience some existential angst, let's call it trauma right now. And to come out, you become empowered. You have to empower yourself to come out of that. Once you come out of it and you look around with your new empowered eyes, you can see joy. And sometimes you weren't able to see joy because you were sort of drowning in the trauma, which is not to discount the trauma or say it's easy to find that joy or to feel empowered. But that is really sort of the movement and the way that a person has to sort of evolve in that way, I think.
Absolutely. And I think what I've started to notice, and I'm trying to help sort of us all think about, is that this three-legged stool, right? This idea that that empowerment is the individual narrative. It's the personal piece that we as human beings can find a pathway out of trauma or to push through trauma. That's the empowerment piece. The joy piece is the communal piece. It's the collective. It's where we come together in community and in groups to do something about that sense of feeling empowered. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the full circle of the stool. Right.
Yep.
And
I love it. I love it. And, you know, you talked about trauma. I think the first time you spoke about it in this milieu was at Let's Talk 2E at our conference as our closing keynote one year. So that was very powerful, that talk that you gave, which also remains on demand and is evergreen. But I think that was really like, I think where you're all processing, going through and looking back, right? You come and you become an adult and you look back, and all of a sudden, when you start learning about what gifted and neurodiversity and 2E means, there's so many aha moments that my adult clients, my parent clients, even teachers and clinicians have when they look back at their own childhood and go, oh, that's what that was, you know, and suddenly they realize. So I love this idea of joy and equity. Can we sort of segue into there? I want to know, because the idea is bringing joy and equity into focus is the theme, correct? So tell me how those two ideas intersect, and specifically in the gifted and 2E context, joy and equity. And I know we talked a lot about this empowerment and finding joy, but how does the equity piece, and I imagine you're talking also about different cultures and races who maybe are under-identified as gifted or 2E and who are finding a home.
It's such an important question that you're asking. And, you know, the movie is so about equity, right? We're asking an equity question with the G-Word documentary, that question to remind your listeners and viewers, who gets to be gifted in America and why in the 21st century, right? That's an equity inquiry. And I am all about equity. This film is about equity, and our impact enterprise around the film is also about equity, right? And so it behooves us as a movie and a movement to, if we want to bring joy into the conversation, right, we have to interrogate joy. We have to make sure that joy makes sense with our equity priorities, right? And I think the only way that I can make sense of that for myself, at least as I begin to interrogate it, is to remind us all that our personal happiness is something that is important to the well-being of the larger movements that we want to be involved with every day, right? And so your joy matters regardless of who you are, and therefore your gifted joy matters. And it's extremely important that we feel okay about that, right? And I think that the dynamic there is that, can our giftedness be in the room with other aspects of ourselves and our experience, right? So we know that giftedness does not sort of live over here separate from our identities, right? So if we are queer or trans or
as much as some people might try to make it that way, as much as people mask and try, particularly women who try to dumb it down, yeah, that's such an important, repeat that was so important.
Well, so the different parts of ourselves are not separate from our giftedness, right? Or our neurodiversity. You know, we live and work and are evolving in this extremely intersectional time. And that concept of intersectionality, I think our giftedness, our intelligence, our brain, our expression of those things that are really who we are, it doesn't sit separately in our experience every day from those other aspects of our identity. When you show up at school, when you show up at work, you are all of those things, right? And sometimes that can be difficult, right? Because it comes with stigma or other kinds of prejudice. And so
go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to say that it can come with stigma and prejudice. So if your other areas of identity formation over here are challenging for you, then of course your gifted pieces over here are going to be also challenging for you, right? So
the definition of 2E, right? You've got the lagging skills and the challenges and the asynchronous development and gifted, and they're a paradox. You're a paradox. It's like our good friend Susan Baum talks about the blue and the yellow and the green in between, and the green is the whole person. That's
exactly
what we need to focus on.
And I love that. And I like to think that maybe green is where the joy resides. Like that's where the glass really is half full. That's where, I mean, joy opens us up to concepts of hope and resilience and pushing through trauma. And joy is a communal concept. And so I just feel like, this is not a directive. It's not like hashtag gifted joy is going to be a lights on, lights off kind of thing for people to just sort of understand it right away. It's an invitation to connect the dots with your own experience in your own way, with your own passions. And for me, like, what is not equity about, if not more than that, right? I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of debate around what equity really means. There are conversations between, trying to help us understand the difference between equality versus equity. And I sort of feel like all those conversations are swirling around us all the time, depending on the different social, cultural, political, ideological spaces that we move through every day. And so those conversations are real, and they're going to be challenging, right? When you come at this through joy, right, you're kind of, it's an experiment. It's an idea that we can do it differently, that it all doesn't have to be about showing up, in a sort of traumatic veil where things are, all the time so difficult. I mean, maybe this is, in part a bit selfish on my part, because I just, I do the work every day of making the movie and supporting the movement. And I want to help sort of change the story for people. We do a lot of work in communities through our impact enterprise where I see the trauma, and this idea of providing a little bit of space for hashtag gifted joy was really just our attempt to say, you know what, we deserve this. You know what, we're allowed to feel joy. Gifted and neurodiverse and twice exceptional folks, it doesn't all have to be about a struggle. It kind of will be, it's sort of baked in there, but if we don't encourage those points of joy for people, why are we even in a community?
Well, and the interesting thing is there's a lot of backlash about the word gifted, right? Gifted, everything's easy. It's a gift. Who doesn't like gifts, right? This one doesn't come with a receipt and you can't return it. But, if you think, if you can hold on to that piece, and we can encourage parents and teachers and children themselves, gifted to we adults themselves, to really stop, because what our message is look at my whole person, look at my whole being.
Exactly.
And the whole being needs to have that opportunity for joy. So instead of all the judgment and the assumption and the trying to meet somebody's expectations and beating oneself up for, I love this. This is like the pause button. Marc, you've created a big pause button. Everybody hit pause and feel the joy. Whatever it is in your life, think about it and feel the joy.
Exactly. And joy belongs to everyone. Joy is the purview of every community, every kind of person. It really can belong to everyone. We're, this moment that we're in, where we're embracing things like mindfulness and, different ways of sort of self-care, in a very traumatic time. Like, the joy narrative is one that I really want to encourage folks who are gifted, talented, or neurodiverse, or whatever words you use to describe yourself as gifted expression. I really want people to lean into the concept of joy, because you know what? We deserve it.
Yeah,
we really do.
I love it. And Marc, what joy you just brought today. So thank you so much for being on the Gifted and Distractible vlog and being our very first guest and helping us celebrate GTN Awareness Week. And thank you everybody for listening. Share this widely. Go to the gwordfilm.com and check out all the amazing resources there, and find some joy today.
Hashtag gifted joy. See you online.
Thanks, Marc.
Thank you.